My name is Chris Fisher. I'm the director of the Portsmouth Institute. This is not how I expected to spend June 20th this year, but that's okay. We're rolling with the punches, and it's great to have us here. I'd like to just start with a prayer before we begin today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
Grant me grace, O merciful God, to desire ardently all that is pleasing to thee, to examine it prudently, to acknowledge it truthfully, and to accomplish it perfectly, for the praise and glory of thy name. Amen. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So I just want to start by thanking everyone for coming on for this, for you participants, for joining in, spending part of your June Saturday Father's Day weekend with us. I want to thank Heather and all of our speakers that we'll have with us today for working with us to make this conference work in a new format. So thank you, Heather, for agreeing to be part of us. Heather's coming from Pasadena, California, so it's 3 hours behind, 7 o'clock her time, bright and early. So I appreciate her joining us. I want to thank too, you guys have probably all been getting emails from my colleague Jordan Size. I want to say thank you to him for helping me to take all this virtually. So thank you, Jordan. And I also want to take a minute to thank our sponsors who helped make all of this possible this year, especially the Center for Catholic Studies at the University of St. Thomas, where to tip my cards a bit, I'm a student there through their online program. They're amazing program. They have, but I think, and I hope this doesn't ruffle any feathers, I think they're one of the best programs in the country if you want to really get a sense for what the Catholic intellectual life is all about. And I'm particularly excited for the confessions class this fall. So if you're interested in that, if you're in ministry, if you're in education, if you're just interested in exploring the Catholic intellectual life, check out the Center for Catholic Studies at the University of St. Thomas and their online program in particular. I want to thank Thomas Aquinas College. Many of you know Thomas Aquinas. They're an amazing college, both in Massachusetts and in California. The Fellowship of Catholic University Students, or FOCUS, they're doing some of the most amazing work in Catholic evangelization on colleges today. Cluny Media, our friends here from Rhode Island, publishing some of the best works in Catholic literature today, including a book we'll have coming out together with them on John Henry Nouwen this summer. And I want to thank the Manquehue Apostolic Movement, our friends in Chile, Santiago. I see some of you guys here. Great to see you. They do amazing work as missionaries, especially as Lectio Divina missionaries, including coming here to Portsmouth Abbey and to St. Louis Abbey every year to teach us the divine practice there of Lectio Divina. I want to thank too the Aquinas Institute at Princeton University, Providence College Humanities Forum, the Grace J. Palmisano Center for Campus Ministry at Merrimack College, the Brown Risley Catholic Community, the Collegium Institute for Catholic Thought and Culture, and the Center for the Restoration of Christian Culture at Thomas More College of Liberal Arts. Those are all our sponsors for this event. And I will be thanking them. You might get tired of me thanking them. I'm going to thank them every time though, because they've helped us bring this together. And I promised them I would. Okay, so thank you all. Thank you for being here. I think what we hope to accomplish through these discussion sessions is two things, really. In one sense, it's kind of like the Q&A at what the conference would be. So hopefully you've watched the videos for all of our speakers so far, and you've gotten a sense for what the topic is and what their main argument is and how they want to help us grow in the virtues and practices of the Christian life that we are exploring together over the course of this conference. So in one sense, you might think of it like live Q&A. On the other hand, though, we're here, we've got this smaller group, we're here in this kind of more intimate setting, we can see each other's faces, and so I hope that there's more of a sense of an intimate conversation as well, that we can actually interact, that we can ask some back and forth, and that we can have almost more of a seminar style feel that feels more personal than simply just kind of a Q&A. So this is kind of the challenge and the blessing of moving to virtual, right, is that we get to encounter each other perhaps more personally in an ironic way than we would have previously, okay? So you get to ask your questions, and hopefully you get those questions answered. The format will go like this. In a moment, I'll introduce Heather King. She'll give a 5-minute or so summary of her talk, just kind of introduce us again to the major themes that she wants to explore with us. And then if you have a question, and I hope all of you do, you can use your hand raising function in Zoom. I'm going to just do a quick screen share. Hopefully this works right. Let me pull it up. All right, can you all see the screen? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Okay, so to raise your hand in Zoom, what you do is you click on the bottom bar of your Zoom screen where it says participants. If you click that, a screen should pop open over here, and there should be a raise hand function all the way to the right. If you want to ask a question, just do that, click the raise hand, and then what I'll do is I'll call on them one by one as I see the hands raised. When I call on you, make sure you unmute. You can ask your question, and then when you're done, just make sure you lower your hand. If you don't lower your hand will stay raised the whole time, and then I don't know if you're asking a new question. So when you're done with your question, just lower your hand, and that'll help things progress. Say your name. You can say your institutional affiliation if you'd like, and then you can ask the question. I'm going to have everybody muted throughout the conversation. That's not because I don't want to hear your voice, it's just because I don't want to hear the background noise. so the mutes are on. So when you go to ask your question, just be sure to unmute yourself. And the last thing I want to mention, just logistically here, if the speakers mention any resources, a book or an article or a video that they think you should watch, I'm going to have my colleague Jordan send those out through the chat function on Zoom. So we can actually have kind of a live log of any resources that might be mentioned. That way, when you wrap up, if you want to follow up on anything, you can go and do that. Okay? Any questions at all about logistics or about that before I introduce our speaker for the morning? Okay. So, with that said, let me introduce our guest this morning, Heather King. Heather King is an award-winning memoirist, columnist, and blogger with several books. I should say those books are all wonderful. We've read many of them here as a community at Portsmouth Abbey. I know the monks in the monastery. Abbot Matthew is on the call. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I think one of Heather's books, Shirt of Flame, was read as part of the monastic reading over mealtime. So we're a big fan of Heather here at the Abbey. She speaks nationwide, leads writing workshops, and writes a weekly column on arts and culture for Angelus News, the Archdiocesan newspaper of LA. For more, visit heather-king.com. All right, that is Heather. Heather, I'm going to give it away to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I feel like I kind of like burst into tears. I'm so touched to be here and to see you all. And I have to give a shout out to Abbot Matthew. I got your card yesterday. Thank you. Abbot Matthew has welcomed me, as has Chris, to the Abbey. And I see Bill Rooney, who is my pal, who took me out to lunch in New York City, right by the Dominican guest house. And yeah, so I see some familiar faces, and welcome. It's just wonderful to see all of you. All right, just a short recap. I hope everyone watched my video, but so the theme is pilgrimage, inner and outer, and the hook upon which I sort of am hanging this particular little story has to do with this cataclysmic falling in love experience, unrequited love, by the way, that happened. It's quite a while ago now, probably at least 15, 17 years ago. And I was on the heels. I'm a convert, came into the church in '96. I was married for quite a while, but I wasn't a Catholic when we got married. We eloped to the island of Nantucket. I grew up in the coast of New Hampshire. And anyway, the marriage had ended. I was in the process of starting to have it annulled, and I it was, okay, so I wrote a book that has not been published and maybe never will about the experience. So I just want to read, just to set the tone of what this experience was to me, because it was shattering. So I said, the closest I can come to describing the effect this seemingly run-of-the-mill, slightly overweight guy with glasses had had on me since the moment we'd met was the effect of Beatrice on Dante. If you've ever been enthralled to such a phenomenon, you know you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. That I was 50 when the event struck made matters exponentially worse. At 50, you know you're going to die. At 50, you know you're probably, oh God, never going to feel so intensely about anyone again. I felt as if I were being simultaneously brought vitally, electrically alive and killed. The physical desire was overwhelming, but more excruciating still was the desire for my womanhood, my creativity to be made whole, a hunger that gnawed and raked and flayed. John Donne's Holy Sonnet 14 describes the sensation perfectly. Except thou enthrall me, I never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except thou ravish me. See, I'm such a sap. This is why I like this. It's, you know, part of this is, I think the best thing about us also causes us always the most pain, right? If you have like this kind of this like super sensitive heart, that is what is going to crucify you. So I said from the beginning, I'd seen my experience as essentially religious, part passion, part pathology, half holy fire, half fires of hell. I should say, yeah, it was like it was unrequited. You know, the guy was like, Heather, I'm too sick to have a relationship. I mean, it was like, you know, we never even kissed, by the way. I didn't say that there was nothing, no. He would have none of it, which is a good thing, because I would have just thrown my, you know, supposedly ardent, faithful Catholicism would have been like totally out the window. And then I would have, you know, probably had to be in a mental institution for the rest of my life. So in a way, I was really protected, even though at the time, of course, it seemed like this hideous, why, Lord, why did you put this feeling in my heart and not, it just felt like a stillbirth. Why is it not? And meanwhile, we did do stuff. We did a lot, you know, we would celebrate our birthdays together, and we had Christmas dinner together, and we produced a play together, and he was a writer too. So there was this whole, I mean, I wasn't completely nuts and just made the thing up out of whole cloth, but my, you know, it was not a sort of Trinitarian relationship. So clearly I'd gotten the dictum, love the creator more than the created, backward, but I'd also clearly been granted a window onto the divine. I couldn't contain all that was happening. I wanted to both explode and collapse, and no one could dissuade me. Occasionally, I try to describe this cataclysmic occurrence that I could not see my way through or around, that I could not understand. In the kindest possible way, people responded, that's not love, or love is reciprocal, or that's just infatuation. I'd given up trying to mount a defense, and like Christ before Pilate, I told myself, stood silent. So I'll give you an idea of so anyway, in the thrall of this thing, and I was in such anguish, I almost with this urge, this kind of transcendent, subliminal, I don't know where it came from outside of me, this urge to sort of travel like a migratory bird. And I ended up taking off in my 96 Celica convertible at the time. And I had this urge to go back to my mother, who was still alive at the time. And so I drove cross country from LA to the coast of New Hampshire and back. And I made it a pilgrimage by going to Mass every single day. That was I just knew, stay close to the Eucharist, stay close to the Eucharist. Jesus he is holding you fast. Don't kill yourself. Don't drink again. and just stay close to the Eucharist. And I went to Mass every single day. So that was how I ordered my trip. And it's, you know, there's a lot of places, you know, Mass is usually 8:15, 8 o'clock daily. So I would, that's what I would do. I would research the Mass the day before and plan my trip accordingly, where I was going to stay the night before. And it was on a shoestring budget, major. So, you know, I was staying at Motel 6s and or convents or wherever I could. And I made it. On the way back, I stopped in the Minnesota hometown of the guy and went to Mass. I had this thing, I must go to Mass. He'd been raised Catholic, of course, was like despised the church, which was to my huge sorrow. So I wanted to go to Mass at the one church in the world, because he'd been raised Catholic, that we would have, it was the one church we would have both attended Mass at. And that was very important to me. And, you know, when I did that, and anyway, so there, you know, during the pilgrimage, nothing, I mean, it was just as much in much anguish as when I returned as when I had set out. And it, but eventually it worked itself out. It really was, I think, a dark night of the soul. I used to think that was a term way too elevated, but, you know, I was like super, I was faithful. You know, I would just praying, you know, the office and all this, my you know, practice that I developed. And so, and I think the upshot of it has been this deep purification of my love did find a focus, and it is Christ, you know. And I think, you know, this stuff is written on our bodies, and really at the end of it, it had to do, it's too long a story, but it has to do with going to confession one day, actually. And it was a totally ordinary confession, but the priest is one of these kind of old school guys. He was kind of very firm. And, you know, and when I got out of the confessional, I just heard, you know, Heather, do you love me? Yes, Lord. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. Tend my lambs. You know, it's like, are you serious about this or not? Because this is the marrow of your bones. And so, you know, I feel like out of it all, like this kind of celibacy, you know, I just realized, oh, this is something this is how I can give myself fully to, it's like a gift, you know, this beautiful gift, because I do want to lay down my life for my friends and to give everything to Christ. And so now, yeah, it's like it's like something's been worked through me so that I'm just like settled, you know. I'm not looking for a guy. I don't, you know, this is how I'm to bear fruit into the world. So, you know, the overarching sort of lesson, if that's the word, is it's just, he's always at work in us, even in these periods when we think, are you kidding me? Like, okay, this time my life has truly taken a like sort of absurd wrong turn. But Christ is always there drawing us closer. So anyway, that's kind of what I have to say. I probably went on way too long, but.
No, not at all. Wonderful, Heather. Thank you. So let's open up for questions, and if it's okay, maybe I'll jump in with one of my own, Heather. And this is something that I was thinking of when you were just talking just now about the body. And one thing that came to mind for me throughout this talk and just thinking about pilgrimage in general is, you know, what is this about pilgrimage and the spiritual life? Why is it good? Why is it appropriate for the body to be involved in prayer in this way? Like, what do those two things have to do with one another? Can't we just compartmentalize spiritual life and say, like, that has nothing to do with the body? Why in pilgrimage do you think, why do they have to have something to do with one another?
Chris, we are incarnate beings who live on the body and blood of our Lord. I mean, yeah, to me, that's why Catholicism is a completely different realm than Protestantism, to me, for example, because we are incarnate, because we the ground of our life is the transubstantiation that takes place in the Mass. And so, and I think it goes very much to, you don't come to Christ in the deepest way through your intellect alone. Certainly our intellect is brought to bear, but to me, you come, I mean, I came as a sinner, and, you know, and the sins were you know, sort of bodily type of sins for one thing, but you know, I've been thinking a lot as I prepared for this. There's a Kafka short story, long short story, called The Penal Colony. It's almost nauseating to read. It's incredibly difficult story to read, but it has to do with this instrument of torture that's called the harrow. And it consists of this vibrating, they strap the condemned to the bed, and there are these two opposing sets of vibrating needles that very slowly drive this message that's written out through your body. And in the story, the message is honor thy superiors. And but it's kind of a weird, sort of backward allegorical crucifixion type story. And I feel like, yeah, that was what was driven through literally my bowels and my heart, and the whole thing, feed my sheep. So, you know, I think otherwise we're just following a sort of extrinsic set of rules, which is fine as far as it goes, but it's just, we're missing the fullness of the joy, I think. And it also, I think when we come through things only intellectually, obviously it makes us rigid. I mean, that was the problem with the Pharisees. They kind of got it in there. They'd memorized the rules, but they hadn't experienced the thing through their bodies. And Christ, of course, is the ultimate model of that with the crucifixion.
Thanks, Heather. All right, everyone, feel free to now raise your hand if you have a question. And remember, when I call on you, just unmute yourself, and then we'll get moving. Evan Matthew, is that a hand raise? Okay, all right, good. Put it high, like we tell the students, Evan Matthew. Put them high.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. Okay. Do I ask the question now?
Yes, please, go
Heather, my question is, you mentioned briefly just now, but also in your talk, that part of your religious routine, if I may put it that way, is the divine office. Now, I'm a person who's been saying the divine office one way or another for 60-some years, and I am interested to know how you, a laywoman, but a contemplative laywoman, what you can say, if anything, about the divine office. And I say that, if anything, because I've tried to say something about it over the years in retreat conferences I've given. And I never feel that I have done what I want to do or what I want to say. So that's it. Thank you. My head is down.
Well, I'm sure you're way more articulate than I could be. I actually have my my breviary right next to me here. Well, I will just say that, okay, as I said, I'm a convert, came in 96, and around 2000, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I went to a nearby monastery here, where I'm actually becoming an oblate, a Benedictine oblate, and that was where I learned about the office, and instantly, I thought, oh, this is only priests are allowed to. Or nuns maybe would be allowed to pray this. And then, but I saw, no, this is for the lay. This is part of the treasury of the church. And instantly, once I got the hang of it, I mean, the Psalms, the whole rhythm of it, it just sets the tone for the day. I don't have a TV, although I get plenty of news, but I think to get up and immediately ground ourselves in the truth, in beauty, in the truth of the human condition, of these Psalms that Christ knew, right? And the readings and the whole, just the whole order of it. And then they begin to, and then giving thanks. I just do morning and evening prayer, usually evening. I'm far from some super wonderful practitioner, but I think to give thanks somehow at the end of the day also just roots my day in prayer. And then the Psalms, of course, begin to work themselves into your inner landscape. So, sometimes these lines they'll just come up. Like I'll be late for Mass and I'll be sort of sprinting along the sidewalk and I'll think, oh, he makes my feet swift as those of hinds. He enables me to go up on the heights. Psalm 51, for some reason, the Friday, wash me, I shall be whiter than snow. That, for some reason, has really imprinted itself. But I mean, listen, to get up and turn on the television and listen to the cacophonous, chaotic, hateful, not true voices, to me, I mean, not true in the deepest sense. I just can't, I'm so easily caught up in that kind of turmoil and self-righteousness and taking sides. I think the office helps me to avoid getting sucked into that sort of diabolical vortex that goes nowhere. Yeah, it's like a companion to me. So I highly, 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 and then you can get the 4-volume, which is really great. And then it just keeps you rooted in the liturgical seasons, right? I mean, it's Advent, we get to have the blue book. Oh, it's Easter, we get to have and Lent, we get to have the red book, because we're going to shed some blood. And look at Abbot Matthew. Look at his beautiful presence and being. See, rooted in take him as your example. That's kind of what I have to say, I guess, about that.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'd just like to say that my mother said the office almost every day. She was a third order Carmelite. And I think she had an original book from, I'm going to guess maybe the 40s or something, because the binding was completely undone. It was basically a bunch of loose pages. But she continued to say it from the same book. And if I were to get the Divine Office, I think I wouldn't know where to get it. I guess I would go through Amazon, and maybe I would get the wrong version or something like that. It might be a good thing to give out free to Portsmouth Institute attendees, and get it started there, because I think it's a great idea to get up and read something. A lot of people do, I'm certainly in that category, have trouble making up their own prayers to God, and following a format like that day in and day out, I think is great, and something that I don't do now, but I would be interested in.
Yeah, and you're praying, right? You're praying with the whole church, with all religious and all the other lay people around the world. So it's a beautiful communal, even though if you're like me, alone in well, of course, like all of us, we would be alone in our room. But and there's a shorter version that you can buy that's a kind of just 4-week throughout the year. That's a good way to start. Yeah, I bought mine, the 4-volume, I got on eBay, and it's great. Like, you'll get these used, there'll be like a rose petal between the pages or an old prayer card or something. So, it could be, a priest that's prayed the office forever and died, and you have his breviary. But it's the other thing that's great about it, because there's all the solemnities and the feasts and the memorials have a slightly different, depending, like the Sacred Heart yesterday, it's a solemnity. So there's an evening prayer one, so you come to look forward to these, it's We get to have our special office for the Sacred Heart. It really brings us, and then your favorite saints, and St. Augustine and August 28th. You have these things that you look forward to. It gets you very much deeper into the real liturgical cycle and closer to the saints, the martyrs and saints of the church.
Alvaro.
Hi, Heather. My name is Alvaro. Thank you for your beautiful words and for sharing your experience. And I have to say, I'm interested in your experience with Saint Therese of Lisieux.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is that experience, but I imagine it has a lot to do with this experience you had. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, that's a great question, and absolutely. In fact, I wrote a book about Saint Therese, Shirt of Flame, from a T.S. Eliot. I guess, is it the Four Quartets? Is that what it's called? Anyway, I discovered her kind of in the middle of this whole experience, and I was asked if I wanted to write a book about a saint by a certain publishing house, and I chose Saint Therese of Lisieux, even though I didn't know a lot about her. I was and afterward I thought, oh, she chose me because she is the perfect saint to have been through this experience with. She herself said, that if she had gone the other way, if she'd not become a nun, she would have been like Mary Magdalene, because of her own. She had a kind of almost a love addict tendency in her. So she was her own sort of bride of Christ, her own yearning love for Christ that she manifested, of course, by becoming a cloistered nun. Unlike me, she was a lifelong virgin and she didn't have my checkered past, but the hiddenness, her emphasis on this sort of the love that burns super, super bright, but not flamboyantly in our hearts. She had the Apostles' Creed written in blood next to her heart. And so that just helped me understand, I think, eventually my experience as it was, I kind of make fun of myself and say, oh, I felt like the Mary touched by the angel Gabriel. I'm meant to bring love into the world. But in fact, that was true, just not in the way I thought. So Therese helped me unbelievably. And she's just a wonderful foil for, or companion for this heart that is kind of over emotive. She absolutely recognized that about herself. There's nothing wrong with a deep, sensitive, yearning heart, but she realized we have to put a frame around, we have to channel that totally to Christ. And she also has this great line that I think of many times, because the line is, there are no raptures, no ecstasies, only service. And anytime I start thinking, oh, we like a little glitter, right? We like a little, let's sort of, I don't know, a little flamboyance, a little sparkle. And I'm always brought back to, there are no ecstasy. When one more person, or whatever, I think I'm, touching their heart deeply with my vocation of writing, blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, how do you get an agent? Like they're on a completely different page. I'm all about like devoting ourselves, body, mind, and soul. And they're sort of like, how do you make money? And it's like, there are no raptures, no ecstasies, only service. And I think we all find that. But there's also a huge sense of joy. And that is the freedom. That's the freedom. That's the light. That's the resurrection that comes from this kind of crucifixion. And I think it's the mark of its authenticity. we don't become these grim, dour, dowdy, sort of doomsday people who have no spark of life in us. It's totally the contrary, because we have been set free. And I will just add, I think it also helps us to, it very much helps me to sort of detach from the incredible force of the peer pressure of the culture, our culture, that is so virulently anti-Catholic, anti-truth, anti-God, anti-peace, anti-love. You know, I live in the middle of Los Angeles. I mean, you know, it's its own form of exile. I mean, I'm a practicing open Catholic without trying to shove it down anyone's throat, but you know, in a sea of uber politically correct, you know, people who, anyway, I don't need to gild that lily, but it really helps me to not either fall into my own kind of judgment, Phariseeism, or despair, or, oh, I just need to isolate myself because I'm so pure and holy. It's like, no, you are called, I have been called to be in the marketplace and to bear the tension that entails for me in my particular station. And I just pray to do that with, you know, a sense of humor and yeah, just life.
That's great. Heather, I'm going to remember that when a student asks me, so you get the question, you know, how do you get an agent? The analogous question for the teacher is that going to be on the test? It's like, no, we can't test on that. Okay, I'm going to shoot it over to Bill Rooney and then Cheryl McCarthy after Bill.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, Heather.
Hey, Bill.
How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So this question has actually been sort of in my mind for a long time with respect to you in particular. As I recall, and I could have this wrong, but as I recall, near your conversion or as part of your conversion, I believe you have said in some context that you looked upon the crucifix and you said, any religion who can place their God on a crucifix with such suffering is for me. And many people react to the hardship and the suffering and the brokenness and the grittiness of life by shunning religion and saying, any God who permits or creates a world that is so perishable and ridden with difficulty can't be the God for me. And yet you seem to have the diametrically opposed reaction that any God who can incur the brokenness and suffering and hardship of the world is the God for me. And I just wondered whether I had that right and whether you would sort of elaborate on that, especially sort of in the context of your telling the story of your struggle with this unrequited love.
Yeah, that's more or less a paraphrase. Yes, I mean, my first, I wrote a whole book about my conversion called Redeemed. But in short, I'd been raised Protestant, but I had not been to church, and you know, I was like a barroom drunk for 20 years. I wasn't going to any church. But when I began my search, I went all over. Anyway, there was only one church left, the Catholic Church, and I went to a daily mass at St. Basil's. This day is enshrined in memory. St. Basil's in Koreatown, LA, and I went to a noon mass as a truly in fear and trembling, you know, as a supplicant, as a like, could the Catholic Church be the place for me? And I went in and I was scared, and I didn't know if there was a, you know, secret password or something. And it's not like I'd never seen a crucifix with a body on it before, clearly. But I saw I just saw the body on the cross, and it was like my entire molecular structure just changed in the instant into alignment. What I saw was, oh, he's not saying we need to suffer more. He is saying, I'm with you in the human condition, in the suffering you're already in. And this is the human condition. We're going to die. I mean, we're sentient beings who know we are going to die. That alone is just a massive existential sort of fact and a kind of sentence, if you will, to live under, and how to make sense of that. So, I mean, listen, it's either that or what's the truer thing, to have the body nailed to the cross or an empty cross signifying, I guess, this kind of vague resurrection? To me, the truer thing is the human condition. It's the body nailed to the cross. Implicit in that is the resurrection, right? The kingdom of God is at hand. It's here, it's now. Go out, cleanse the sick. He gives us a reason to live. Heal the sick, cleanse the leper. Go within wherever you are. Go and bring love into the world, and you're going to find out what that means, you know. And there's like he says, my burden is light, and take up your cross. It just, everything about it struck me as the only way to both navigate through the world and give meaning to our suffering, but not with the emphasis on the suffering, not to get stuck in the suffering. But how can you, I mean, look, our whole culture is about, let's pretend it doesn't exist. There's some police brutality, let's wipe out the police. There's some priests who abuse kids, let's wipe out the priesthood. We don't like the way history has gone, let's wipe out history. It's this bizarre kind of totalitarian effort to annihilate. You know, that's what you get without religion. You get Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark. You know, you love the beautiful woman, she has a birthmark, let's, you know, get rid of the birthmark and in the process kill her. So you know, it's a way, the cross to me is a way to hold the tension of all the paradoxes in the world, with like this Christ, who says, love one another as I loved you, with love, this self-sacrificing love at the center. So nothing else remotely makes sense. I don't know how else you could go through the world both with joy and a sense of purpose, and a sense of humor about our sort of bumbling, you know, the way we go about that. So thank you, Bill.
It's 10:45, but I want to.
Thank you, Heather.
But I want to give Cheryl a chance to ask a question, and this will be the last question for this session. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. You got to unmute yourself, Cheryl. Wait, you're still muted, Cheryl.
Mute.
There you go.
I'll say.
Yeah.
Heather, thank you for sharing your very personal journey. And I was taken by the theme of the pilgrimage, and especially because you said that a pilgrimage is an acceptance of pain and suffering, if I remember from your keynote address. And I see a pilgrimage as a journey of joy in finding purpose and meaning in life. And so I was pleased to hear you answering Bill's question and referring to the joy. But could you explain what you mean by that, that it is a suffering and a pain? I've been on 3 pilgrimages, one with my husband, 10 weeks on the road across America. And he was very devout, and we did our readings every day, and we found masses in churches as you did cross country. And it was quite startling, the changes that we observed, and we never had a fight, 10 weeks. Then after my husband died, I did 2 more pilgrimages, one with my daughter on the Camino de Santiago, and another with a friend. We went following the footsteps of Jesus with the Jesuits. Sorry to the Benedictines, but the Jesuits know how to ask a question and let you think about it. And I think of the Benedictines as knowing, as all knowing. So on that journey was Father James Martin and Father Matt Malone from America Media, who led that pilgrimage. And it was so moving, and it was so joyful. We had mass every day, we had readings, we had, it was so joyful sitting out on the Sea of Galilee and in silence for 30 minutes, pondering what it meant. And when Jesus walked on the water. So we'd have a reading, and then we could think about it, and we responded in the evening. So for me, a pilgrimage is joy, seeking joy and purpose and meaning in life, and gratitude to God. So would you explain what you meant by a pilgrimage as an acceptance of pain and suffering?
Well, you went on the rich person's pilgrimage. No, I'm teasing. Well, I think, I don't mean, listen, if you walk the Camino, there's pain in, you're walking 25 miles a day. I'm not talking about an emphasis on pain. I was already in deep psychic pain. And I think people often go, right, one kind of pilgrimage is when you're in good spirits, and you've got your nice meals laid out, and you've got the wonderful priest, and that's beautiful. I'm all for that. But I'm just saying my pilgrimage was more, it had an outer counterpart, but it was an inner, it was a deep, something was being worked out in my soul in a deep, deep way. And that necessarily involves, I think, for me, any kind of authentic growth, always, pain is not the point of it, but it doesn't take place. Transformation, this is the central emblem of our faith, is the cross. So I think that doesn't mean, oh, we're in pain every other second or every second, or that we seek pain, God forbid. No, it's just, there's going to be enough. And I think it has to do with the courage. That quote came from the Catherine Doherty book, Stranick, and she says, that was her discovery, that real pilgrimage involves the acceptance of pain, because you go into men's hearts, and men's hearts are rocky, and you go with bare feet, and your feet. And I certainly have found that. The whole purpose of pilgrimage is to prepare us to be of service, to lay down our lives for our friends. And anyone who's tried to do that at all knows you meet with all kinds of hostility and resistance and seeming failure. So just that sort of, just the stuff of life. But you're absolutely right. Pilgrimage, all of life, exactly. Joy, go. I came to bring joy and bring it abundantly, says Christ. So it's fantastic. Yeah. And that's, that's what this is this morning for me. I'm going to go to one of my 12-step meetings in a bit. I'm leading my writing workshop later in the day. It's all life-giving joy and pain.
I want to give anyone a chance who has to log off, an opportunity to do that here without any worry, and we'll meet back at 11:15 for our session with Sravamari. So if you have to hop off, totally fine, and we'll see you back here, same Zoom link at 11:15. Although I want to, if Heather, if you have a few more minutes, I see either Matthew has a question,
Sure.
again, or Brother Sixtus has a question. Okay,
Yeah.
for him to ask. But if you need to go, you're more than welcome to anybody. But
No,
we'll
I'm fine.
Good morning, everybody. Heather, this is Brother Sixtus. I'm from the St. Louis Abbey, but
Hi.
I was at your talk a few years ago here at Portsmouth. I think you spoke at breakfast one morning, and you moved me deeply. So I'm living here at Portsmouth, trying to learn more about the Benedictine life at the feet of Abbot Matthew right here. You spoke very candidly that year about trying to overcome your addiction to alcohol. And that's what touched me so personally. Today, ironically, I think it's June 20th, this would be my father's 100th birthday. He was born on June 20th, 1920. And for me, it's not a day of celebration. In particular, for me and my brothers, it was a difficult month of June when my father's birthday also fell on Father's Day. My father was an alcoholic. He was a rageaholic. But what I learned from you that during that talk you gave was your struggles, and it's taught me a lot of things. Number one, I have a lot of friends. I actually have students. I have former students who deal with alcoholism in their family and their own lives, and I may not remember their birthdays. I may not remember their feast day. Sometimes they don't get a birthday card or a Christmas card from me, but I try to always remember their anniversary of sobriety, because I know that's an important time for people struggling with that. Your talk that year also reminded me of a book by Father Nouwen called The Wounded Healer, famous book from the 60s or 70s. I have 2 or 3 copies of it. But he talks about how no matter what you've been through, and I've dealt with people in my life, even monks, Benedictine monks all over the place, who are struggling with issues. And the best thing I can tell them is to read that book, to listen to you, because no matter how wounded you are, you can take that woundedness, you can take those pains, you can take those struggles, and help other people. So in my life, I've been wounded by my father's alcoholism, but I'm able to talk to people, not just as a monk, especially the students in the school, not so much here at Portsmouth. I'm kind of new here, but especially back in St. Louis and at my university days, when I could let them know that I know I can't walk in their shoes, but I kind of know what they're going through. And they're startled, they're surprised, because here I am now a monk. And they think, I don't know what they think about us, but they certainly don't think we've ever had to deal with those struggles. So anyway, no question, but just thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Heather. Thank you for being part of this, for being with us. And thank you all for making this a great discussion. But thank you, Heather, so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here. All right. God bless you all. Look as we go out and spread the gospel to the ends of the earth, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much, Chris.
Of course. Yeah. No, thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. And we'll see you back here at the Abbey on campus before long. Hopefully we'll have you here in person.